The settlement on Kreveth Prime had always been tense. Humans and the Krevathi shared the northern continent by necessity, not choice. The Galactic Council had mandated the arrangement after both species filed competing terraforming claims. 3 years of uneasy coexistence had taught both sides to maintain distance, to exchange brief nods at supply depots, and to never, ever enter each other's residential sectors. Clara Wynne had respected those boundaries religiously. As the human settlement's chief engineer, she understood that one wrong move could spark an incident that would echo across star systems. But boundaries meant nothing when she saw the smoke rising from the Krevathi quarter that autumn evening. The den was ablaze. Flames licked hungrily at the curved organic structure, consuming the bioresin walls that the Krevathi crafted from native flora. Clara's first thought was to activate the emergency comm system, to alert both human and Krevathi responders. Her second thought died in her throat when she heard the screams, not adult Krevathi battle cries which could shatter glass and freeze blood. These were higher-pitched, desperate. The cubs. Clara's legs moved before her mind caught up. She sprinted across the neutral zone, her boots kicking up red dust. The heat hit her 50 meters out, a physical wall that made her skin prickle. She could see Krevathi adults circling the structure, their sleek predatory bodies tense with anguish. They were too large to fit through the den's entrance, which had partially collapsed. Their claws scraped uselessly at burning walls. One of them was Taran Ka. Clara recognized the settlement's Krevathi liaison by the distinctive silver striping along her spine. Taran Ka's obsidian eyes met Clara's for a fraction of a second. In that gaze, Clara saw something she'd never expected to find in a Krevathi: helplessness. Clara didn't pause to think about diplomatic incidents or species barriers, or the fact that Krevathi cubs had needle-sharp claws and instincts honed by millions of years of apex predation. She grabbed a water canister from a nearby emergency station, doused her jacket, wrapped it around her head and shoulders, and dove through the burning entrance. The smoke inside was choking, acrid with chemicals her human lungs weren't designed to process. She dropped to her knees where the air was clearer and crawled forward. The interior of the den was a maze of curved chambers, but the cubs' cries guided her like a beacon. She found them huddled in what must have been a sleeping chamber. 5 cubs, each about the size of a large dog, their scales still soft and mottled with juvenile patterns. Their eyes were squeezed shut against the smoke, and they mewled pitifully. When Clara reached for the first one, it instinctively swiped at her, leaving 3 bleeding scratches across her forearm. She gritted her teeth and scooped it up anyway. The cub was heavier than she expected. She tucked it against her chest with one arm and grabbed another with her free hand. They struggled, terrified and disoriented, their claws shredding her jacket. Clara stumbled back toward the entrance, half blind, her lungs screaming for clean air. She burst through the collapsed doorway and thrust the 2 cubs toward the waiting adults. Krevathi hands, gentler than she'd ever imagined they could be, took the younglings from her. Clara didn't wait for thanks or acknowledgement. She turned and plunged back into the inferno. The second trip was harder. The smoke had thickened and a section of the ceiling had collapsed, blocking her previous path. Clara crawled over smoldering debris, feeling the heat through her gloves. She found the remaining 3 cubs pressed against the far wall, crying for their mother. Clara grabbed 2, one under each arm, and used her teeth to grip the collar of the third, dragging it along as she crawled backward toward safety. Her vision was narrowing to a tunnel. Her lungs felt like they were filled with ground glass. The cubs squirmed and scratched, their panic feeding her own. She could feel consciousness slipping away as she reached the entrance. Hands pulled her out, human hands this time. Her fellow colonists had arrived, and they dragged her and the cubs clear of the structure just as a support beam crashed down where she'd been seconds before. Clara collapsed onto the red soil, coughing violently. Someone pressed an oxygen mask to her face. Through watering eyes, she saw Taranka approaching. The 5 cubs gathered behind her, singed but alive. The Krevathi mother stopped 3 paces away. In her species culture, that distance indicated respect for a superior. Slowly, with a grace that seemed impossible for such a predatory being, Taranka lowered herself until her head touched the ground at Clara's feet. It was a gesture no human had ever seen a Krevathi make, a gesture that, according to the xenoanthropology briefings, they reserved for the most honored members of their own species. When Tarinka arose, her obsidian eyes gleamed with something that transcended language. She reached out one clawed hand and placed it gently over Clara's heart. Then she spoke in halting standard. Pack, you are pack. In Krivathi culture, there was no higher bond. Over the following weeks, as Clara's burns healed and the Krivathi rebuilt their den, something shifted in the settlement. Krivathi hunters began leaving prime cuts of meat at the human commissary. Human engineers helped construct fire suppression systems for the Krivathi quarter. Children of both species began playing together in the neutral zone, supervised by watchful but no longer hostile adults. Taranka visited Clara every day during her recovery, bringing healing salves made from native plants and teaching her words in the Krivathi language. The cubs, now imprinted on Clara's scent, would break from their mother's lessons to nuzzle against the human woman's legs whenever she passed by. The Galactic Council would later cite Krevath Prime as a model for interspecies cooperation. Diplomats and xenosociologists would write papers analyzing the breakthrough, but those who were there knew the truth was simpler and more profound. Sometimes the bridge between species isn't built with treaties or trade agreements. Sometimes it's built by one person who sees a mother's anguish and runs toward the flames rather than away from them. Clara Wynne never considered herself a hero. When pressed by curious reporters, she would simply shrug and say she did what anyone would do. But Taranka knew better. In the quiet moments when both mothers watched their charges play together in the red dust of an alien world, the Krivathi would place her hand over her heart and then extend it toward Clara. Pack, family, home. Some words, it turned out, needed no translation at all.